How's it going, Andrew?
Hey, Matt.
Back again, episode number 4.
Cuatro.
We're getting serious about this thing.
4 episodes. I almost want to celebrate if we can make it to a 5th. What do we do when we get to 10?
I don't know.
Champagne? Champagna?
I don't know. 10's not enough for that.
Is that for 100?
Yeah, that's for 100.
Okay. I'm going to hold you to that. We'll get a nice bottle if we can make it to 100. So what's been going on, man?
Not much. Living life, working.
Oh, yeah.
What about you?
Not too much. Still kind of, moving my way along with my wife's pregnancy. So that's something that's exciting. That's still kind of, moving along. I also got my select master's degree of the Cryptic Council the other day, which is pretty cool.
Excellent. Those are excellent degrees.
I was very impressed with them. It's kind of cool that it finishes out the craft mason story with some secrets that only cryptic masons can know. So if you're ever interested, it was cool. I really, really enjoyed it, and they do a really, really good job at Kilbourne Council. The
York Rite bodies are a lot of fun. The degrees are very impressive.
I think what was interesting to me is it kind of reminds me of like a different Blue Lodge, and I guess that's why it's oftentimes called the Red Lodge for chapter, and the Purple Lodge, I guess they're called the Council technically. But it's interesting that it's still like a small bunch of guys who are. It feels like you're in a Blue Lodge, which is very personal. So it was cool. I really, really enjoyed it. I had a great time. I thought it was really informative, and I'm still kind of unpacking kind of what I saw.
Yeah, you'll be unpacking that one for a little bit.
It's hard because there's not a lot of books on it either, so I've been scrounging around. And to the listeners, if there's any cryptic masons out there that know any really good cryptic books, hit me up. And you can hit me up at timeforfellowship@gmail.com.
I would be interested in a book list for that one as well.
All right, we'll keep our eyes out. We're trusting you, listeners. We put our faith in you. So let us kick this puppy off.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
Boom. So, what do we got to talk about today? What is on our docket here?
Well, I think we're going to dive into something that you and I have made a point of it in our Masonic career to be able to do well, and something that we both feel like are overlooked but extraordinarily important parts of the degrees, which would be the charges. And we might as well start with Entered Apprentice because it just makes sense to start there.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic because there's not a lot that people do to do education on that topic, and I do think there's a lot of very practical applications within that. So the charges are often overlooked because I think it being at the end of the degree, people have been kind of overwhelmed by all the things they've seen, so they kind of forget that in that moment you are being instructed on exactly what you should be doing.
Exactly. And it is at the end, and it's after a long night of taking a lot of different things in. But once you start to get to learn them and know them, and the more you read them, the more you're like, man, there is this is where the stuff that applies to my life is also contained very heavily.
It's interesting because there's a lot of esoteric and spiritual things inculcated within our rituals, but the charge itself is all very practical and earthly. It's like, nope, this is something you should be doing. This is, what's expected. Don't do this. Try to do this. And it's a good topic to talk about since it is, it's not maintained under the secrecy aspects of our obligation. So it's an easy one that we can do good education on as well. And the Entered Apprentice one has just a lot to unpack because that's one of the longer ones. It's actually one of the harder ones, surprisingly.
It is, and it's just such an excellent charge, though. It is longer, but there's a lot of stuff to tell an Entered Apprentice about what it means to be a Mason and what he should and shouldn't be doing.
So we thought it would be prudent and practical to separate a couple things out within this charge that stand out to us is very important and very practical that can be applied to any Mason's lives. So the first area we wanted to look at is the portion that talks about the acting upon the square. Can you read that little section for me, please?
To your neighbor, in acting upon the square, and doing unto him as you wish he should do unto you. Sounds familiar. I feel like I've heard something very similar to that somewhere else.
Yeah, it sounds like that might be in a book somewhere, maybe.
Yeah. I think the Bible, maybe? Love thy neighbors?
I think it's almost in different words, and almost every holy writing has something that kind of speaks to that a little bit. It's something that humans for a long time have identified as like a divine attribute, is being able to use extreme empathy to treat people better. And it's the first introduction you kind of get of a practical applied working tool, because they don't say, love your neighbor as yourself directly. They say treat acting upon the square, which is Masonic lingo. And, the square is a symbol of morality, uprightness, and, good dealings. And this is so important because I think this is one of the cornerstones of Masonry, and it's where we can be able to create an essence of harmony.
I don't know what I can add to that, because you kind of nailed it right there. But yeah, I mean, we touched on this stuff a little bit in episode 2 about how you should act with other people. And, it's right there in the Entered Apprentice charge now for us, telling us that you need to treat other people like you want them to treat you, which has been something your parents probably told you when you were a little kid. It's something you've been learning your whole life, and here it is getting re-emphasized in Masonry as like, look, you need to do this.
It's also one of the hardest things to do. It's so hard to do, and that's why I think it's been selected by so many different faiths as a divine type of characteristic, because it is so challenging. It's really challenging to see empathy in someone that maybe you can't find anything you like about them, but still saying, regardless of how I feel, I'm going to treat them. If I was standing in their shoes, how would I like to be treated by this person? And, that could be because the person's ignorant, or maybe they're misinformed, and maybe they just have some mental health issues. Would they like to be treated with aggressiveness or anger, or, be getting unfair dealings because you don't like them? Or would they like to be treated with respect? And in that moment, it's really hard to always give that to someone. And so as Masons, we're told right off the bat, like, you need to pay attention. And the square is shoved in our face constantly. It's on our logo.
Right. Yeah. The square is always there to remind us, and it should be there to remind you about, how to treat another brother, but how to treat other people in general. And, I don't want to say people overlook it. It is one of the more challenging things on this planet to do, is to treat everybody like you would like to be treated, because we all have our difficulties. We all lose our patience. We all get a little hot-headed sometimes. And that all feeds into us not treating people the way we would want to be treated in the same situation. And it's very difficult to execute that one. However, like we've said before, you're not a perfect ashlar, but you're striving to be. So you should always be striving to meet that goal as well.
And then when, you're not perfect, how you check your ashlar. You apply a square to it to see if your corners are squared. So if you're about to make an action, I like to do this in my personal life, especially in emails. Emails are easy because, and honestly, this is very practical, and it's a good practicing tool. I like to use the square on emails. It's because emails, you're not forced to respond quickly, so you actually have time to pause and reflect. And I've found that by practicing, especially at work, we've all had emails at work where someone is either not giving you what they need, maybe not enough information, or maybe they come off a little bit rude in their email. You're able to then remind yourself, because if you actively pause and go, okay, let me apply my square and check my email with the square virtue. Are you assuming good intent from this email? Maybe you're just reading it in a voice that they weren't intending. Are you responding and throwing gasoline on this fire to now make this into a bigger issue? And when you start practicing going, all right, I wrote my email out and I wrote it in the snarkiest way possible. You know what I mean? And I do this all the time. I write a snarky response like, you owe me ABC. And if you had done your job, I would have been able to do my job.
And then you delete it.
And then I read it and go, that felt good to type. And then I say, let me apply my square. I delete the email and I remove that sense of accusatory nature and focus on trying to solve the problem together. And I've found that as I practice that in email form, you catch yourself because you practice thinking, all right, let me apply my square. And I like to use the actual symbol in my mind too. I'll say to myself, let me apply my square. Let me apply the square to this. I'm reinforcing that language, but I'm also reinforcing in my mind the ability to remember to catch yourself when you are acting not on the square and you're not loving your neighbor as yourself. And I've found in conversations and stuff where in the past, if someone was saying something that I didn't like, I might get angry and immediately retort something or jump out of line. I've found myself able to remember that like it's an email and pause and go, just calm down and just respond in a way that you would like to be treated.
And that's applied Freemasonry in action right there.
Applied business masonry. Send nice emails.
And take a pause before you respond to something that's angering you. Just in general. I mean, that's just good practice.
It's funny because when you start trying to practice that mindset, it's like the anger used to be, and it still is. I mean, anger has a way of pulling you into doing something that maybe is uncharacteristic of yourself. It can overcome you. You see red. You know, it pulls you. It's very, that's just the nature of the beast. But when you practice that more and more, you kind of change the trigger, like you're almost hypnotizing yourself. Every time you get angry, your brain goes, act upon the square, because you did that on the email. And then you're like, wait, hold on, pause. And then even the pause, the anger will subside to like 50 to 20% because you didn't immediately surf that fiery wave that is anger. You paused and went, all right, let's treat this man like I'd like to be treated, man or woman. Anyone's your neighbor, your whole community.
Right, exactly. And, that pause also gives you the opportunity to be like, is this something that's really worth being this angry over?
Or like, do I even care that much? Like sometimes you'll find stuff, you're like, why do I even care?
Why am I letting this ruin my day right now? Yeah.
Like when someone at the grocery store, okay, I have an example. Like when someone's at Taco Bell and they're talking on their phone and then they pull up WhatsApp and this happened to me recently. They start showing the phone to the menu in front of you and you're getting irked by it and you're like, oh my God, why are you doing this in public? That you're able to catch yourself and go, you know what? Who cares? Who really cares about half this stuff? We get mad about so much stuff that who cares?
Right. I mean, the polite thing would have been for that person to step off to the side of the line and let other people go first if they didn't know their order. But yeah, it's nothing to get angry over.
You have to notice that isn't saying treat your neighbor upon the square if they're treating you upon the square.
Right. No, it's just treat your neighbor, equally.
It means regardless of their behavior, you're on the square, and you are the one who is taking accountability for your own actions. You can't make them accountable for their actions, and even if you try, it's a failed effort for the most part. And so the judgment is upon you as a Mason to strive above those types of petty things.
Agreed. Should we move into the next little piece that kind of ties in with this piece that we wanted to talk about?
Yeah, we kind of selected this other part of the charge because I feel like these go together very, very well in kind of another application of using that square. So can you read the section on the interest, favor, and prejudice?
Sure. In your outward demeanor, be particularly careful to avoid censure or reproach. Let not interest, favor, or prejudice bias your integrity or influence you to be guilty of a dishonorable action.
Now, wasn't that almost exactly what we were just talking about?
Yeah, it's pretty much exactly what we were talking about. So that's just another way of saying act upon the square.
And it's like, even in the first one, they were like, we said this once in one way, but I want to say this again in another, where it's acting upon the square during good times is easy, but acting upon it when you could either, one, benefit. So being square dealing is another aspect of the square. So interest and favor. Maybe you would be benefiting from taking advantage of a brother for some sort of service you're providing and you could upcharge him. Or you could be kind of dishonorable, like you could look at, let's say you're a car mechanic, you could say, oh, I'm going to make up that there's some additional problems with this car to try to make an extra buck. So you're like, oh, this is of good interest to me. It's favorable. But then you have to remember that will dishonor you. And so you're not acting upon the square.
Right. Exactly. And then, we all know what prejudice is, and the less prejudice there is in the world, the better off we would all be.
And it's one of those things that it's specifically included because we are a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multi-socioeconomic fraternity, but also we're all of those things as a society too. Lodges are just a microcosm of the communities they sit in, and people's prejudices for various things cause them to be naughty, and it causes them to do things that are unbecoming, and that kind of, you think that you're like acting smart, but it's ruining the way you look to other people. And in a certain way, that if you're wearing a square and compass on your hat, then you're ruining the reputation of the fraternity. So as an entered apprentice, right away, you're like, you got to start nipping some of this stuff in the bud.
Right. Well, and I mean, we're saying in your outward demeanor. So, if you need to think thoughts inside your head to get you through it, right?
We all do.
You're right. You got to have that thought pass through your head. Just don't let it come out. And especially if you are currently representing the fraternity with a tattoo that's visible, a ring, a hat, a shirt, anything like that, your behavior, I feel like, has to be above board, because you're no longer just representing yourself. You're representing the entire fraternity. And I think we can just kind of close out that little part, because we almost did an entire episode about this stuff particularly, but it's funny that it comes up in the charge. And I do want to make it clear for anybody who's listening who may be like, hey, these guys are saying the charge on a podcast. It's in plain text. It's not ciphered, so it's fine.
Yep, my understanding is based on our obligation. I've been confirmed this with multiple people that this is fine. So the other portion of the charge that we thought was another interesting one that I think people kind of don't take seriously, and I think we should take seriously every time we as people on the sidelines even hear this charge, is about the well-informed brother. So can you read that portion for us, please?
Sure. I used to be able to do this one by memory, but not so much anymore. At your leisure hours, that you may improve in Masonic knowledge, you are to converse with well-informed brethren, who will always be as ready to give as you will be ready to receive instruction.
So this, for the person receiving the charge, is them telling them that we have an amenity available to them, which is additional instruction. So this needs to be taken very seriously as a member of a lodge who is having a new member come in. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's pretty much saying that person should be able to talk with almost any brother in the lodge in regards to Freemasonry and get the answers he's looking for and the answers he can get as an entered apprentice.
So another practical point to being a Mason is it is our job to make sure that at minimum we're decently well informed on the craft. And, if a brother comes up to you and they are asking you for information as a senior brother to them, if you don't know the answer, you should try to find that out for them and get back to them, because it is our job to educate one another. And if you promise to this new candidate that there are people who can help him learn, and then he walks around a room and asks 10 people a question, everyone's like, I don't know, that's not a good look. And it's really robbing him what we've just promised him. And when we invite someone into our fraternity, we're making it's a mutual situation. They're joining us, but, we also owe it to them. So when we invite them in, we are making a pact with them that we can give them that light and that information. So it's important as Masons to at least make some effort, at least once a month, to learn a little bit more about Masonry, because you should be able to inform these people, at least on the basics, and probably a little bit deeper.
Right. I agree. And at the very, very minimum, you should be able to walk them over to the person in the lodge that does probably have the answer.
I mean, anything is better than a hard no. So it's one of those things where I think that not everyone's going to know everything about Masonry, and there's so much to learn. But, we're supposed to be industrious and lovers of life. It's our job to do that. And if you just receive your degrees and then you don't try to actually expand any of that knowledge any further, it's kind of a disservice to yourself and to the lodge. And you don't have to be a master scholar to, one, listen to a podcast like us. You can learn about Masonry here, or the other beautiful podcasts around the country. You can listen to some Further Light podcasts coming out of the Grand Lodge, get some little information. Those are pretty short and sweet, and you can learn a lot from those too. It's just not everyone's going to be this massive Masonic scholar, but you should really know the basics of if someone comes up and goes, what does it mean to, be plumb? And then you shouldn't be like, oh, I don't know, that's just in our ritual. You have to at least have a basic understanding, because that's to your benefit as well.
It is very much so to your benefit, but yeah, we want to make the impression to these newer guys that their questions can get answered. And if not immediately, they'll get an answer later.
Yep. I don't think that's unfair at all, too. I mean, I've had questions that are asked to me. I was asked a question. So we were coming in here, and there was some brethren out there working on some of their examination questions. And right when I walk in, they go, hey, can you tell me the meaning of the 7 orders of architecture? And I was like, oh, boy. I was like, I haven't actually delved terribly deep into that. And I just said, I know they mean the senses, I know this and that, but I will put together an education piece. I'll go do some research for you guys. I'll put an education piece and have it done as stated by the end of the year. Because, I can find that information, but at the same time, now I'm curious because it's just there's so much you can delve into. I just haven't quite delved into that portion.
I'm excited for that education piece. That should be a good one.
And if anyone has some good information on the schools of architecture, please send it to me, because or else I'm going to be
Time for fellowship@gmail.com.
Yep. But yeah, so I think it's just important to remember we owe it to our brethren to make sure that if we don't have it, that some people in the lodge are taking some initiative to be able to instruct our young little BB brethren coming in ready to learn.
Right. And when we say young, we don't necessarily mean in age, in Masonry.
Yeah,
young in Masonry.
A young Mason. And kind of on that same note, what else have we got in this charge that's so good? I really like the portion that kind of sticks out because right off the bat, it reminds us to guard the west gate. Or no.
Yeah. Guard the west gate.
Yeah, let's do the west gate one.
Yeah. Excuse me. If in the circle of your acquaintance you find a person desirous of being initiated into Masonry, be particularly careful not to give him encouragement unless you are convinced he will conform to our rules.
This one is very overlooked in my opinion because everyone's so excited to try to get new members. It's right away as an entered apprentice that we are being told to be cautious and kind of not just immediately if someone's like, I'm interested in Masonry, be like, heck yeah, you are, let's get you in. But to actually really think about, is this person a good candidate for Masonry before you refer him to those who have the authority to recommend?
Right. And I mean, I've had more than a few friends who, have maybe done very light inquiries. They haven't necessarily expressly asked me how they become a Mason or anything like that, but they've done light inquiries, and to be honest, in a couple of those cases, I haven't encouraged them to ask any more questions just because I was concerned that they wouldn't be a good member of the fraternity.
It's honestly just good advice because it can get you out of a very awkward situation. Because someone's a friend of yours doesn't necessarily always mean that they would be a good fit for Masonry. Like I've had some friends who have kind of inquired, but where they are at their lives right now, I just don't think it's a good idea.
Well, and I think you touched on something very important there, which I kind of overlooked when I was saying what I was saying, is that it all depends on where somebody is in their life, too. It might just not be the right time for them.
Mm-hmm. I've had that with some guys very easily where I'm just like, you're just kind of all over the place right now. It's just, when they ask, I'll just give basic info, where there's been other people who have asked who in my head I've been like, God, I've been waiting for them to ask.
Yeah.
And you'll notice the difference with me because I will lighten up and start, talking their ear off, being like, oh, it's this and that, all this, because they would be someone that I've already identified if they were interested as someone that could be really, really good in the fraternity. But I think it's important as a reminder because the first time that you overshare because you're excited about Masonry to a person that would be a horrible fit, and then they're like, I'm in, let's do it. And then you have to be the guy to be like, that's just, it can make things very uncomfortable, and it's a really weird spot to put yourself in. And so it's more helpful just to be discreet when you need to be discreet and sharing when you need to be sharing, because you don't want to let people down. And sometimes, those eggs got to cook a little bit longer before they be ready for a commitment. And Masonry is a commitment, and it's a serious one. And we have strict rules that need to be followed. And if you don't feel like that person would be comfortable doing that, you're setting the fraternity up for someone who could be a pain in the butt for the lodge or could potentially soil the reputation of the fraternity. So it's really, really important to know when silence and circumspection is the best course of action and when sharing is appropriate.
Well, yeah. And, to look at it from a different perspective, maybe so much it isn't that they're not right for the fraternity. Maybe sometimes the fraternity isn't right for them. Mm-hmm. It's just not the type of thing they would get into. They don't want to deal with the memory work. They don't want to do all that kind of stuff. So, maybe it's not their thing.
And I've had a handful of people, maybe two or three, who they've had family who are Masons, but they're both atheists. And I was like, you could be a great member of this fraternity, but it's just one of those things that this isn't for you because our ritual and our ideology surrounds having a belief in a higher power. And if you really want to get involved in your community and do this type of stuff, there are other groups that are available to people like that. And they're great. The Lions do really, really good work for their communities. But to be a Mason, it requires a certain type of person. And so it's awkward in that way where you're like, dude, I'm not saying you're a bad person, but this is just what Masonry is about. So I'm not going to overly encourage you on this because you're not applicable. It's not applicable to you because of our requirements. And so in those cases, I have been like, dude, Rotary Club, the Lions, they do a lot of really, really good stuff. And if you want to put your energy into something like that, that's great. But, that's just one of those things.
Well, and that is a great suggestion, and you also run into the issues where maybe their family is not going to be supportive of them doing it, which can be an issue, and that's something that we need to take consider seriously. Wow.
Considerably.
Wow.
I like that word. That's in the dictionary.
Man, my brain is just not wanting to function today. I think, honestly, we should probably kind of wrap this little section up right now because I'm thinking we could actually probably spend an entire episode talking about guarding the West Gate.
That's a good idea. And I think that's something that has always been a hot topic in Masonry. But I think that there's a lot of practical ways that we could provide advice on tactics to use to make sure you're really getting to know someone. So, yeah, let's kick that rock, a little sneak preview, and a little rock down the road on that one.
Right. I think there was one more part of the charge we had talked about potentially.
I really wanted to end our charge discussion on our zeal for the institution.
Oh.
Because this one is where Masons put their feet in their mouth sometimes, and I have been guilty of this.
Now, if you start talking about social media, especially, this can be a very hot topic. But let me just read the sentence here. Neither are you to suffer your zeal for the institution to lead you into argument with those who, through ignorance, may ridicule it.
Yep.
Yep. Been there, done that probably a time or two. But we're all rough ashlers, Part of being a rough ashler, though, is identifying that you've done something or that you have a rough spot and trying to correct it. So I'm gonna talk about this one for a second because you and I actually had an at-length conversation via Discord messages one time about this, to the point of we looked up the definition of words to try and decide exactly what this sentence was and wasn't charging us to do.
Yeah, it's a little ambiguous. Well, it's not ambiguous.
It's not ambiguous.
Some interpretation that can be made.
But you can, first of all, is it an argument or a discussion that you're having? Is it heated? Is it calm? Is it civil? There's a difference there. Secondly, is it somebody ridiculing it, or is it somebody flatly spreading false information that can create a bigger problem? And is there a differentiation there, or does that differentiation not matter?
It's such a gray area on what is and isn't ridicule, because is slander ridicule? Yes. Is this taking the expense? Can be. Or is it someone who just is their intent? Sometimes you'll see people who are incorrect, but their intention is not necessarily them making fun of it or taking the piss out of it. They don't understand what it is. And I do think it's important to note, they say, do not lead you into conversation with those who ridicule it. It's the fact that it's a heated argument, because once you get heated, you can actually make the fraternity look worse in your effort to try to correct someone.
I've seen a lot of that on TikTok.
Oh, I know. And it's like one of those moments where when people lose their temper and start being like, how dare you talk about my fraternity like this? I love it so much. You're a bad person because of A, B, C. Then you're like, no, this isn't helping our reputation. You're not helping anyone. And I think that's the important distinction in this.
I would agree. I think the distinction is you can't lower yourself to the level of getting upset, getting angry, starting to name call and stuff like that. You have to take the high road. You have to present your facts. You have to present them clearly. You have to do it in a way that is civil and nice and not beating up on the other person. You can explain to somebody that the things they're saying are false, and you can give them the reasons why without being a jerk about it.
Mm-hmm. All because you're right doesn't mean you're doing something the right way. All because you're in the right doesn't mean you did something the right way. And I think another cautionary tale within this one is, when is it not worth your time? It falls back to that don't cast pearls among swine analogy from the Bible that's in there, where it's like sometimes you hear a person that you just know he's just unhinged. And you just go, you know what? You don't have to argue with everyone, and Masonry doesn't need you to defend it all the time. And I think a lot of the times silence and circumspection is the best answer. And you can almost tell when someone's writing something in a way that it's either they're not mad, but they're just confused, or you can tell right away, like, this person is he's just not going to be worth your time. And, I had a conversation with a guy the other day who was kind of like off the bat, like, saying some kind of rude things. And my rebuttal, like, hey, that's not really true. We are just kind of men who are trying to work on ourselves and help our communities. And he's like, oh, I had just heard that. And then I'm like, hey, why don't you go read Freemasons for Dummies? If you're interested in this topic, you can get a better information. And so that was a worthwhile conversation, whereas a lot of the time, silence and circumspection is the best course of action.
I would agree with that. And, you have to, I don't want to call them battles, but you have to choose your battles carefully in this analogy. And, I mean, the best example I know of is there's a brother from Kentucky who used to be a conspiracy theorist and thought all these crazy things about Masonry, and then started watching videos and stuff and became educated about the topic through brothers who post content, and is now a brother himself because he realized that there was nothing nefarious about the fraternity.
And I mean, that's the thing is I guarantee some old school Masons would be like, no, you ignore it. You ignore it. And I think that a lot of the time, I think that is good advice a lot of the time.
A lot of the time it is, yes.
And to let our actions speak louder than our words. And I think that is sage advice. Don't get me wrong. But I do think that as people who are meant to spread light, as long as we can spread it in a clear, kind, and concise way, just to be like, hey, it's not that. We're just a fraternity who's working on ourselves and helping our community and bonding with one another and doing all these good works. It's important that we also advocate for ourselves sometimes too, because Masonry has fallen victim to its silence as well. And so I think there needs to be a bit of circumspection, and we need to circumscribe our silence a little bit too, and be like, there's a time to be quiet, and honestly, we need to know when that's appropriate and should be used. But there's also a time to give information that's helpful to a community that is oftentimes very misinformed on what the fraternity is. And the information online is so heinous and confusing, and it's so easy for someone to fall into that trap, that I think knowing when the right time to use the proper tool is helpful. But oftentimes, silence and circumspection is the best result, but no one is somebody who can be, who's willing to have their mind changed.
Well, I think we're at an interesting crossroads in the fraternity right now, especially with social media. We've seen anti-Masonic activities. They're not organized as activities, but we've seen individuals, thank you, attempt to burn down buildings more often, make threats against buildings. There's a brother who was killed outside of his lodge in Texas right after installation because of a unhinged person. And I think we're at a crossroads because I think we need to weigh the options with social media as a whole, as a fraternity, as to whether circumspection and silence and ignoring the problem is the better thing, or making our voices known in the appropriate way is the better course of action. And I think I'm going to leave that there. We're going to see if our listeners have any opinions on it. We're going to table it because that could be a whole episode conversation, the pros and cons of social media, how much faster conspiracy theories spread, how much faster how much slower than that correct information spreads.
Oh, it's so slow.
So I think we should table that. Listeners, if you have any opinion on the pros and cons of Freemasonry and social media, let's hear them.
Yep. Please send any of those, your opinions on that to timeforfellowship@gmail.com. It is an interesting topic. It's a hot button topic. I don't know if we know what the right answer is, and I don't know if anyone does, but I know it's something that modern Freemasons are rolling around with right now. Yeah, so it's very interesting.
It is a very hot button topic, and it's a very massive topic, and I don't think anybody is going to have the right answer to it, but I think we can come to a common agreement in what we do like seeing and don't like seeing on social media and how we should be handling ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Cool. We'll leave that there. So, that's the charges.
Oh, that's the EA charge.
That's the EA charge. If you guys like hearing about the charges, we can definitely go into some other ones as well. There are more. But yeah, let's, you want to hear some news?
Yeah, let's hear some news.
All right, hold on. Let me get prepped. I need to prep myself mentally for reading news. Oh, God. Someone send an ambulance. All right, we're good.
Andrew, it's not that bad.
It hurts.
You got carted off the hurling field for a cramp, though, so I guess.
No cramp. It's fine. Just got to get organized here. All right, so what's been going on in Wisconsin? There's a lot of great works going on, and I want to pick out a couple here. So, there's a very cool news that broke out of Douglas County. Acacia Itasca Lodge had done some really good things for their local fire department. So, a few years ago, the town of Gordon Volunteer Fire Department had the misfortune of having their fire hall burned to the ground, which is, probably the worst thing that can happen to a firefighter. And all their equipment and paraphernalia were lost. Insurance had covered a lot of that, but not everything was covered. So they've been working on a lot of their initiatives to help out this fire department, which is an awesome, awesome initiative. So in 2022, Acacia Itasca Lodge number 329 had presented them with 3 fire suppression tools through Fire Suppression Solutions to the town of Gordon to kind of help with some of that equipment loss. And then prior to the pandemic, they had sponsored a Palm Sunday pancake breakfast for 49 consecutive years. So they've been doing this for a little while, and their senior steward, Brother DeMar, had actually approached the lodge with the idea of hosting this breakfast in conjunction with the Good Neighbor Days, which is an event that goes on in Gordon on the 4th of July weekend. The lodge had agreed that would be a good day, and they started advertising the breakfast. And I know last episode we talked about the importance of advertising, so keep that in mind because that's how you got this really nice event. They were set for a 5K run, and they had their breakfast, and they had probably up to 200 people come to the breakfast.
Wow.
That's a lot of mouths to feed, tell you what.
That is. That's impressive. Good job.
Yep, and they said nearly 400 people were served in 3 hours. Whoa. You know what? I got it wrong. They were projecting 200 and had 400.
Ooh.
That's like controlled chaos.
Oh my God. Round of applause for those guys. That is definitely some controlled chaos, and wow. Excellent event, guys. Good job.
Oh my God, that's insane. So they had... They were able to get that done, and after all the expenses of the lodge were paid, it sounds like they got a donation of maple syrup, which you probably definitely need with that many people. After the expenses of the lodge were paid and all that stuff was done, they were able to make a donation of $1,000 to the Gordon Fire Department, and the Wisconsin Masonic Foundation was able to do their matching program with that as well, which is another good reason to keep your eye out for donating to the acts of kindness. It was an amazing success. This is an awesome example of a well-run event that really had a huge impact on the community for a local fire department that was in need.
Heck yeah, good job.
That's really, really cool.
That is.
I like that a lot.
And this is why I'm saying we need to share our successes, because I love hearing this kind of stuff. I love seeing what other lodges are doing. I love seeing them accomplishing things and just doing good things.
We get so, Masonry can feel very insulated at times where you know everything that's going on in your district, but we forget that so many brothers are working around this entire state just, in the quarries, just working away, and they're just doing good works all over their communities and making the world a better place. Another news story I want to touch on is that Crivets, is that how you pronounce that? Crivets Masons had actually donated $16,000 for canines. So the Masonic Light number 218 in Crivets followed through with a pledge to help the Crivets Police Department secure funding for training police dogs. And they were able to donate $15,000 on July 24th. The lodge had previously donated $1,000 9 months ago, and they thought this was a really, really important way to help the law enforcement in their area. The lodge members also feel like their contributions will make their city a safer place. So that's a lot to be donating to your police department.
That is.
And having a canine unit is immensely helpful for law enforcement.
Oh yeah, yep.
So those are some good events that have been going on in Wisconsin. Quick reminder, not events, but news, I should say. We're going to move on to events in a second here. But if you have any news that you would like us to share, please do not let your work sit in the shadows. Shoot us an email and we'll tell the world what the good works you guys have been doing are.
Well, we'll tell our listeners. Not quite the world yet. Maybe someday.
The whole world's listening. I'm 100% sure. So we're going to come back to events, and a lot of these will be the same as last week. But I want to keep them front of mind in case you're interested in going to these events. One big one that we need to touch on is that the Waterloo Lodge number 63 is having their Sweetheart Luncheon. So the RSVP date for that is today. So if you haven't reached out, please reach out to past Grandmaster Daniel Slavic. You can find his email in the journal, or just reach out to Waterloo Lodge number 63. That's going to be on the 21st of October when the event is. They have a social hour at 11 a.m. and dinner at noon. It's going to be $40 a couple. Just
to make that clear, today is October 12th.
Correct. This is the due date. So if you haven't reached out and you wanted to go to the event, please reach out to them. It's at the Stable Rock Winery and Distillery out in Jefferson. Ozaki Lodge is still having their 175th celebration. That's going to be on October 21st as well. So if you're more in the southeast side of Wisconsin, you would definitely want to make an opportunity to visit them on their 175th anniversary celebration. It's $45 a person, $80 a couple. The reconsecration is at 4:30, dinner is at 5:45, and entertainment to follow at 7 p.m. So if you want more information on that, please reach out to Ozaki Lodge. Probably worth bringing up, we have a Masonic Day of Light that is coming up on November 4th. It's going to be in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, at the Eau Claire, Wisconsin Center at 7 a.m.
It's Eau Claire.
How come I switched?
I don't know.
I just wanted to mess it up so I can make the Eau Clairians mad at me. It's at the Eau Claire, Wisconsin Masonic Center. It's going to start at 7 a.m. It's going to have breakfast and registration. Lodge opens at 8:30 p.m.
A.m., I'm sure.
It's a typo, but yeah, it should be a.m. Reservations are needed by October 23rd. So if you haven't got those in, you probably want to start doing that if you have people who are interested in doing the Day of Light. You can do that by reaching out to the district deputy, Worshipful Brother Franzway. And his email is dd2@wmasons.org. So if you have anyone interested in that, please check that out. The other events I wanted to...
Hold on one second, Andrew. I would like to apologize to all my fellow Blue Golds up in the Eau Claire area for my co-host slip there.
I was right the first time. I don't know why I changed. It's hard being on a microphone, guys. Just give me a break.
I won't let you forget that because I went to college up there. So now you're gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah, I don't know why I switched it. And another good event that we have coming up here is the dun-dun-dun-dun.
What do you got?
First annual Fraternal Freeze Fest. This is going to be hosted by Henry L. Palmer Lodge 301. So what this basically is you're going to be dunking some brothers in ice baths. So your lodge is invited to enter a team of 4 brothers to test themselves against the Palmer Plunge Submersion in icy cold water, all to benefit the Children's Dyslexia Center. And as a person who's dyslexic, I'm a fan of this. So, yeah, this is going to be coming up. It's going to be on November 12th, and it's at Palmer, and it's going to be from 12 a.m. to 4 p.m. And for more information on that, please reach out to Palmer Lodge, which is going to be at henrylpalmerlodge@gmail.com. Henry, letter L, palmerlodge@gmail.com. Matt, can you please promote our Spooketti event as well?
Yeah,
because
sure.
We're going to keep on promoting.
October 26th, Lake Lodge has their annual Spooketti dinner.
Boo, 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 boo.
Well, that was kind of a creepy noise. It's from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Adults are $10. Children under 3 are free. And we'll have candy for the kids. There'll be some people dressed up in costume. Fellowship Hall will be decorated. And we'll have plenty of spaghetti for you all, so please come out and eat.
It's going to be a great time. Well, that wraps up our event. As always, if you have other events you'd like us to promote, the more advanced you let us know, the easier it is for us to get that word out, and we'll get it out early. So if you have anything you'd like us that we're missing, please let us know, and we'll try to get that in there for you.
All right. Well, happy episode 4, Andrew. Looking forward to next time we record.
Yep, and looking forward to the champagne that'll get on the 100th episode.
100th episode. That'll be a couple years, so
yeah,
you're going to be waiting.
I'll be an old man by then.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening.
I'll talk to you guys next time when we're out for fellowship. See ya.